in Russia, Brazil, Myanmar, and the United States. Now for the most dangerous project on the agenda. The world's longest underwater tunnel will connect the cities of Dalian and Yantai across the Bohai Sea, passing through two deadly earthquake fault zones. At 76 miles long, it will be longer than the current first and second ranked underwater tunnels combined, and at a cost of $42 billion, it will be extremely expensive. But the Chinese calculate that it will be worth it. For one, it will slash the 8-hour drive between the two cities to under 2 hours. It will also connect China's isolated northern Rust Belt with its wealthy east coast, adding an additional $3.7 billion to the economy each year. The experience could also establish the Chinese as the preeminent submarine diggers in the world, and would be a serious practice run for far more ambitious potential future mega projects like connecting China to South Korea, or even Russia to the United States across the Bering Strait. Yes, that has actually been proposed. This isn't the first underwater tunnel project for Chinese engineers either, who already gained some experience by completing the 3.8-mile-long Jiaozhou Bay Tunnel in 2011. But while the Bohai Sea is roughly the same depth as the Jiaozhou Bay, the tunnel underneath it will be 20 times longer. When it comes to construction, if they're lucky, the Chinese will encounter only soft seabed, allowing them to use tunnel boring machines the whole way. But if they run into harder rock, they're going to have to use the drill and blast method embraced by the Japanese during construction of the Seikon Tunnel. Using tons of dynamite hundreds of feet underwater is dangerous business, and it resulted in the unfortunate deaths of 4 workers over the course of that project, and many accidental leaks.
In 1976, the project hit its biggest crisis when 80 tons of seawater a minute began leaking in. 1.5 kilometers of tunnel flooded. It took 5 months to get back on track.
The Bohai Tunnel will also have to withstand magnitude 8.0 earthquakes. In 1976, the deadliest earthquake in modern history, a 7.8, killed a record 650,000 people in Tangshan and surrounding areas. In 1969, a quake measuring 7.4 on the Richter scale shook the Bohai Bay itself. And there doesn't seem to be much the engineers can even do about that threat besides simply reinforcing the strength of the tunnel walls. Of course, they could simply not bore a long hole under a deep bay through 2 fault zones, but that doesn't really seem to be an option at this point, because officials throughout China are under enormous pressure to hit GDP economic growth targets. And there aren't many other options that could provide anywhere near as much economic benefit as the Bohai Tunnel, which should break ground sometime in 2016. By now you're seeing the trend here. The world's biggest city, the world's longest canal, biggest airport, longest high-speed rail network, and underwater tunnel. So the fact that China is building the world's largest wind farm too shouldn't surprise you. The Gansu Wind Farm project will produce 20 gigawatts of power by 2020, and will cost nearly $20 billion to build. Turbines are going up at the staggering rate of 35 per day across the 3 areas that make up the power base. In 2012, Gansu's capacity surpassed the total wind-generated electricity produced by all of the United Kingdom, and it's just the largest of 6 mega wind farms currently under construction throughout China. But China isn't embracing wind just to reduce its carbon emissions. It's doing everything it can to simply keep the lights on. Some parts of the country, with booming middle-class populations, suffer persistent electricity shortages because, just like us, people want refrigerators, dishwashers, washer and dryers, and computers in their homes. But there's only so much energy to go around. So China's State Council is pushing for an across-the-board renewable strategy to reduce its dependence on oil, coal, and gas, the finite resources of the 20th century, whose extraction and consumption are subject to constant geopolitical tensions. Since 2013, China has led the world in renewable energy production, with a total capacity of 378 installed gigawatts, coming from projects as wide-ranging as Gansu to hydroelectric power plants like the Three Gorges Dam, which spans the Yangtze River and is the world's largest power station of any kind. In just the last 10 years, China has increased its solar panel production 100-fold to become the world's leading manufacturer of that technology. With China now pumping more CO2 into the atmosphere, than the number 2 and 3 emitting countries, the US and India, combined. It's vital for the future of the planet that it continues using mega projects to create a lot more megawatts of clean, green power. Another answer is nuclear power, which is much less controversial in China because of its prodigious demand for electricity and the inability of its people to mount any real challenges to the government's plans. Mainland China currently has 31 nuclear power reactors in operation and another 24 under construction. Compare this to the United States, which has 99 commercial reactors overall, supplying about 20% of its electricity needs. However, the US currently has plans to build just 5 more reactors, as it's instead choosing to embrace natural gas, wind, and solar power. Even France, who leads the world by generating 3/4 of its electricity from nuclear, is moving away from the technology, and will likely close nearly half its nuclear power plants in the next decade. The Fukushima accident in Japan, after the devastating earthquake there, also accelerated the world's breakup with nuclear power, even causing China to briefly suspend new projects. But while the rest of the world turns its back on nuclear energy, China is doing the opposite, more than quadrupling its nuclear capacity by 2030. The Marquis project is the Haiyang nuclear power plant in Shandong province, which will eventually house 8 AP1000 Westinghouse pressurized water reactors for a total capacity of 8,800 megawatts, 4 times more power than is generated by the Hoover Dam, a power station that provides electricity for 8 million people in the American Southwest. And when you factor in that the average home in China uses a fraction of what an American home uses, the Haiyang plant will end up producing enough electricity for tens of millions of people. But the $13 billion project is only the most powerful of the 13 different nuclear power plants currently under construction across China, 9 of which will have a maximum capacity of more than 6,000 megawatts. Most are near large cities, where power is needed most, but this strategy raises concerns that if there were an accident, tens of millions of residents could be exposed to dangerous radiation. The neighboring Guangdong and Lingao nuclear power plants have 28 million people within a 75-kilometer radius, including Hong Kong. That's many more than the 8 million who live within 75 kilometers of the San Onofre nuclear generation station in Southern California. But the decision was taken in 2013 to shut the California plant down, after numerous safety concerns became known to the public, highlighting the opposite directions the two nations are heading in when it comes to nuclear power. The other issue China must deal with is how to dispose the many tons of radioactive waste it will be generating, which is always a contentious issue because no one wants that in their backyard. The current plan is for construction to commence in 2041 on a high-level waste repository site in the Gobi Desert. On the whole, the danger of a costly nuclear accident that China would pay for in both blood and treasure is fairly significant, but Beijing is apparently willing to live with that risk, judging by its unrestricted embrace of nuclear power. But these are tough choices, and it's important to keep in mind that in the age of climate change and ecological interconnectivity, nuclear power is still an infinitely cleaner alternative to burning coal. The final megaproject featured in our series perfectly highlights both China's ongoing struggle to maintain its unprecedented growth and the unbelievable ambition that's fueling its rise. A constant challenge for most big cities is that there's only so much land to build on. For Hong Kong and Shenzhen, two neighboring metropolises with a total population of nearly 20 million, the boundary it's running into is water, specifically the Pearl River Delta, which separates the uber-populated eastern corridor from the far lesser populated cities of Macau and Zhuhai on its western shore. Today, to get to Macau after landing at Hong Kong International Airport, you are faced with either a 4-hour drive around the mouth of the delta or a long ferry ride through frequently rough waters. But that's about to change, thanks to a $17 billion 6-lane multi-part bridge that will cut the trip down to a 45-minute drive. It is an incredibly complex project and includes cost and construction sharing agreements between mainland China and its special administrative regions of Hong Kong and Macau. Inspired by both the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel in the US and the Øresund Bridge that connects Denmark and Sweden, the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge will not only have to withstand typhoons, but to avoid cutting off one of the world's busiest shipping routes into Hong Kong and its unusually deep natural harbor, it will plunge underwater as a tunnel. And at 28 kilometers, its longest stretch will be as if 15 Golden Gate bridges were lined up end to end to end to end. And that's not even the craziest part. Because Shenzhen doesn't want to be left out, it too will build a mega bridge across the delta just a few miles to the north. Basically, the region is booming so fast, and competition to tap into the cheaper land and labor available on the western side is so great that Shenzhen and Hong Kong have both committed to building multi-billion-dollar mega bridges, and will essentially race to see who finishes theirs first. As you can see from a close look at the map, cities with populations totaling more than 40 million people surround the delta, thus revealing the master plan to lay the foundation for China's second megalopolis, an urban area that could eventually exceed 100 million residents. We started this video with Jing-Jin-Ji, and we're ending it with what I'm calling Hongguangzhong, two megalopolises, each serving as perfect bookends to our story of China. A country that is counting on infrastructure megaprojects like those we've profiled to serve as the foundation for its rapid urbanization. But how well it manages that urbanization will largely define whether it continues its ambitious rise for the rest of the 21st century. For TDC, I'm Bryce Plank. This has been another Daily Conversation original multi-part documentary. If you found the topic of China's addiction to mega projects as fascinating as I do, hit that like button and share it with your friends and followers. If you made it here to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. Click on the on-screen annotations to enjoy the other mini documentaries I've made, like the future mega projects in the rest of the world, the most interesting energy sources of the future, the history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, or my take on the immigration history of the United States of America.